Hello, everyone, and welcome to the ML podcast. In this episode, we're honored to welcome Peter Krauth to discuss one of the most interesting setups in the commodity space, silver. This video will be divided into three parts. Firstly, an introduction of what me and Peter cover in our discussion, and also two slides of ML Center, who we are, etc. Secondly, the full video discussion with me, Peter, and my colleague Fredrik. In the third part of this video, me and Fredrik discuss our main takeaways from our conversation with Peter in Swedish, just to summarize our thoughts for our Swedish audience. In our discussion with Peter, we talk about Peter's background, why he became so focused on silver, and why he believes that silver's combination of monetary and industrial demand makes silver so unique. We also cover how Peter analyzes silver miners and why higher silver prices are coming. ML Center is a community platform of analysts and investors sharing unbiased market information with Swedish retail investors in 2022. At the moment, we have around 450 Swedish investors with a total estimated investment capital of around 100 million US. As stated, ML Center was found 2022 and our business is divided into three pillars. The ML Center ecosystem and our three pillars. So, firstly, we have ML Community, which is the core of ML Center, where we share daily analysis, reports, and our market insights. Secondly, we have ML Learn. Thirdly, we have ML Charity, which is a charity portfolio managed by ML, where returns go to charity. I also want to give you my view of silver from a technical standpoint. I built my brand in the Swedish finance world 5-6 years ago with my technical expertise. Technical analysis is a very important tool that I use to do my analysis. So we've been following the silver space for quite some time. I've been following very closely since 2022, but Fredrik has followed the sector since 2008. He's more of a macro specialist and I'm more of a technical analyst. We became very bullish on the silver spot price back in 2022, but was mainly positioned in 2023-2024. We have enjoyed a very good ride, but we believe this story is not over yet. My target for 2026 is 158 US dollars. And we have this buy zone, as I call it, between these levels that I believe will hold. So I believe it's just a matter of time before the price keeps pushing up and reach new all-time highs. That was it for this part one and the introduction of this video. And now I welcome my guest, Peter. Well, great. Peter, welcome to ML. It's a real pleasure to have you here. It was an honor to meet you in both Toronto and in Stockholm, and we really appreciated the conversation. And also, hopefully, you enjoyed our little gift, silver coin.
Absolutely. Ali, it's a great pleasure of mine to reconnect like this with you. Great connecting with you, at prior conferences. And I look forward to chatting and certainly absolutely appreciate that coin. Yeah, it's nice to see a group, of people, of investors who understand this sector and are willing to take the time to do research, be patient, and I believe it will be very rewarding.
Thank you very much for that. And many of our members are long-term investors in gold, silver, and mining equities. So your perspective will be especially valuable to our community because you followed the sector for many, many years, written a great book extensively about silver in a time when the market was dead. So you have that on your CV. Today I'd like to cover two main areas. So firstly, your background and journey into the sector, and then we'll move into the macro setup for gold and silver. So Peter, for those in our community who may not know your full story, could you briefly walk us through your background and how you found your way into gold, silver, and the mining sector?
Sure. So I actually was a subscriber to several newsletters back in the early 2000s, which started talking about gold and silver when, that we were already a couple of years into what I consider the beginning of the secular bull market. I believe we can maybe talk about that after, but I believe we're still in the same secular bull market, which began, let's say, around 2000, 2001. So it was a couple of years in, and it resonated with me, the talk about these metals, their history, how they've backed currencies going back centuries and millennia. And it just made a lot of sense. I looked at how central banks owned and then sold and then started buying again, and the potential of the sector and how it had performed. Actually, the best analog we have is the 1970s, and it completely trounced regular stocks during that decade. In fact, the Dow and the S&P were essentially flat before inflation, and gold was up. I think it was something like 1,500% in that decade, and silver was up, I think, 2.5 times that. So yeah, very attractive. And I'm prepared to admit that these are not necessarily, I could qualify that, but this is not necessarily a sector you want to own, let's say, forever. The equities in particular, the metals specifically, I think, yes, should be owned to some degree forever. But the equities will have their time. And we saw that in the 70s, we saw that in the early 2000s or in the 2000s, and then we're starting to see it again. And I think this is the second half of this secular bull market. So it's going to be a wild ride. I think, if people take the time to become informed, they could really, make this turn in their favor.
Yeah, thank you very much for that. And it seems that you use the metals as some kind of insurance and use the mining equities to make money on this sector.
Agreed. That's a great way to put it. I mean, the metals for me, they're like savings. It's to protect wealth and purchasing power, and then the miners are sort of that leveraged play on the metals and a way to amplify your returns. And if you again, if you don't have to be a genius and really lucky or anything. If you understand the sector, how it's performing, why it's performing, what's driving it, how far along we are in the bull market, then I think that you can understand and you can take positions in some of these equities to again amplify the returns that you will benefit from through the extent of the bull.
Yeah, yeah, I totally agree. Then you're especially known for silver, for your work on silver. What was it about silver specifically that made you see it such a unique opportunity compared to all the other commodities?
Well, one thing about it is that it's quite ignored, or it has been,
Yeah,
let's say until maybe last year or so, and that in some ways is the appeal. Some of your viewers may know a relatively well-known investor in this space, Rick Rule, and he says you're either a victim or you're a contrarian, and so the victim is the one who follows the crowd, and the contrarian goes against the crowd. And usually that's the most rewarding because the crowd buys typically close to the top, and the contrarian might buy at the bottom, but at the very least tends to buy when something is unloved. And when something is unloved is when you get the best prices. And I felt for a long time that silver was quite unloved. And I talk about in the book how, until in fact, until last October, when we were together
yeah,
at a conference in Stockholm, silver, which was it was one of those 2 days that silver took out its all-time high of $50. I remember that very well. And so until that day, it had been 45 years that silver had not surpassed its all-time nominal high of $50, which it set back in 1980 for the first time. Until that point, all the other major base metals, platinum group metals, precious metals had all surpassed their highs of 1980, and silver was the one standout that had not. So liking an underdog, I guess, it made it appealing. It's also it's a metal that is got really sort of two personalities. It's both industrial and it's money. It's been money longer than gold has. It's considered to have been responsible throughout history for more transactions globally than gold has because of its, smaller, sort of lower value per unit. In other words, an ounce, for example, or a gram costs considerably less than gold. So people have been using it as money to pay for daily transactions, buying groceries or whatever it may be. And so it's been part of our daily lives, frankly, for thousands of years, up until maybe 50 years ago in the late 60s, early 70s, when silver was completely removed from our money. So, and in the last decade, especially more than that, but in the last decade or two, and in particular in the last, I'm going to say, 5 years, silver's industrial uses have just exploded.
Yeah.
And so silver has gone from being less than uh, half of its consumption going to industry. Till 5 years ago, it was 50%, and now it's over 65% of silver's demand is for industry alone. So this has all kinds of implications. It makes it more necessary. It's difficult, if not impossible, to substitute in so many of its applications. And so it's becoming an unavoidable metal, really. And now it's being deemed critical by multiple governments and agencies around the world. So this has really become, silver's in everything. Silver is in our electronics. It's in medical applications. It's in solar panels, the single biggest industrial use.
Oh,
With it in electronics, I like to say it's never more than a meter away from us. It's in our phone, it's in our laptop, it's on our screen, computer screen, microphone, you name it. It's really everywhere because it's so reliable, it's the best conductor, and so on. Um, so it's really ubiquitous. So really, silver, has so many appealing qualities. And as I say, it's a metal that has been ignored for so long. And I just, when I wrote the book, I really had the sense that um, it was going to have its day. It really was going to have its day. There were so many people who would, speak against it and saying, "Oh, it's never going to take out its all-time
yeah.
high. You're wasting your time. It's going to go there. It's going to go back. We've waited 50 years." Well, it's interesting to point out, Ali, that we waited 45 years to get back to $50, and then 3 months to double to 100.
Yeah.
So, and now we have that's been at least what, 4 months now. We haven't gone back to that. We haven't even gone close to $50 yet. We may, who knows? We may test it. I don't think we're going there. I don't think we're going below it. We could. I'm not saying it can't happen, but I think that the current range of, 60, 70, $80 is probably the new low, the new floor for the metal.
Thank you very much for that. I can see you shining when speaking about silver. You really love this.
I
And
sure do.
it's like the contrarian bet. It's like watching a football game, and you always cheer for the underdog, the team
That's right.
that So
Exactly.
thank you
Because
very much. So,
one day it's going to come out on top and it's going to win. The nice thing is that we can now look back and we can see that that has actually been the case and has taken place. And there's good and bad about, this sort of big parabolic move that we saw over the last several months. The bad part is that, some people come in late and then they see it drop immediately. They get afraid. They sell. They get burned. They will never come back. And but the good part is that we see that it has happened. People have been talking about triple digit silver for several years. It has happened when many thought it couldn't happen. And I think we're going back to triple digit and significantly higher within the triple digits at some point. So it's brought a lot of eyeballs and doubters to this market that really simply, thought, "Hey, this could never happen,"
yeah,
and it has. So the prospects are very attractive.
totally agreed. And it's like the market makers playing their games just to shake everybody out. And you mentioned triple digit silver. Keith Neumeyer is the triple digit silver legend, and he's been on the show as well. So we
Sure.
enjoy him a lot. And
Absolutely.
when you analyze mining companies, especially in the junior mining space, how would you describe your investment style? What do you look for in a company before it becomes truly interesting to you?
So I'm going to say that I do something very specific and particular, and the silver market, for me at least, lends itself to that, and I think it's fair and reasonable.
Mm.
It's that I always look my one of my very first filters is the silver content. If it's a company that is exploring, if it has a resource or if it's working towards a resource, does it realistically contain somewhere around at least 40% silver? I'll explain why. And if it's a producer, are the revenues at least 40% from silver? Now, I say this because many companies will have silver in their name, but if you look at really how much silver they contain, they may be at 15, 20%, but they're giving you their resource in what they call silver equivalents. And for me, that's misleading because they take other metals that are in the ground or being mined along with the silver, like gold or copper, lead, zinc, and they convert them at a given price to silver value. And then they say, well, I have 100 million ounces of silver equivalents.
Yeah.
But if you look at how many ounces there really are of silver, it could be 20 million ounces. So for me, that's not a silver company. It has to be, and I think I'm still being relatively generous at 40%. It's not even half. But if you go anything above that, you really start to eliminate, I feel, too many companies to be in this sector. So that's my first main filter. And then I would say after that it would be management. You've probably heard this many times before and your viewers have, but really it's true, it's key. I prefer to look for management that has what I would call a decent or reasonable or maybe even borderline mediocre project, but a fantastic team because odds are they know something we don't. Odds are they're going to manage to turn this into something, attractive and bigger versus a team that either has no track record or has not a very good track record and a better quality project because who knows what they'll end up doing with the project. And then the third, I guess, filter is jurisdiction. And so I should say before that actually share structure is important before even jurisdiction. So share structure, how many shares out does the company have? How and when were they issued to whom? You look at things like, how much cash they have for versus the plans that they have. These kinds of things. The lower the share count, of course, the more attractive because any move in the price of silver and in let's say accomplishments, any progress that they make can typically make the share price move more quickly. It'll have more leverage, and then the last one being jurisdiction. What I find is important about jurisdiction is to typically avoid places that are higher risk. Now, what has been interesting, and I just think it's worth pointing out now, is that until maybe 2, 3 years ago, there were certain places, especially in Latin America. I mean, Lee, you have to go where the silver is.
Yeah.
The silver. There's some in Australia. Let's just, I'll go through it quickly. There's some in Australia. There's some in Canada. There's quite a bit in the U.S. There's a lot in Mexico. And then what's interesting is if you look at a map, I kind of realized this a few years ago. You look at a map of the Americas, for example, North, Central, and South America. Most of the silver is along the west, along the mountain ranges,
Yeah.
and I would think it has to do with tectonic plates, the movements, and so on. And this sort of allowed the silver to form when you had volcanic eruptions and all of that for the silver to fill the voids and to form deposits. And then you've got in some places in Europe, you have in Poland, in Germany to some extent, Russia, and you have exceptionally a couple of mines in Morocco, which are known for silver, some pure silver. So that's really where you find the silver jurisdiction. What I wanted to say earlier is that until a few years ago, there were some places I was staying away from, kind of avoiding, not completely, but avoiding mostly in South America. That has changed a lot. Just in the last couple of years, there have been elections, several elections almost without exception, they've swung from left or middle to middle right or complete or sort of full
Mm.
right. And these are leaders who are all not just talking about being more supportive of business and mining in particular, but are really making moves to to support the mining industry. So it's very encouraging. And one place that stands out for me is Bolivia. It was a pariah for probably 2 decades. I did have one company, despite that, in the portfolio that did okay, has done really well lately. But it was because it there was a large ownership by a larger company that had been operating in Bolivia for multiple years. They had a great connection with that company, and but we've seen improvements in places like Argentina, of course,
Mm.
Chile also lately, Peru to some extent as well. Colombia, we're going to find out soon. Ecuador, perhaps also. So it's really, I'm going to say, encouraging to see these improvements geopolitically because we need a lot more silver. Silver has been in deficit for the last 6 years. We're expected to have ongoing deficits. That's going to push the price up, but we do need a lot more silver. And these are places that have a lot of silver. And so there's going to be a lot of opportunity there. So those are the things that I look at.
Yeah, thank you very much. Very good answer. And just shortly, the what type of company are you looking at? Are it mostly the explorers, the developers, or junior producers, or major producers? How?
So in the newsletter, I really look at everything in the silver space, and that includes everything from sort of the lowest risk being physical silver and ETFs that are backed by physical silver, and then from there, silver miner ETFs, and then after that, the next will be sort of individual companies. Some of the largest silver companies, in fact, are big royalty, and there are very few, but large royalty plays in the space, and then large silver, mainly silver producers, and then mid-tier silver producers, large developers, for example, small producers, and then all the way down to junior
Yeah.
explorers, and even some pre-discovery silver explorers.
Yeah. Thank you very much for that questions. Fredrik can move on.
Yeah, it's really interesting to hear about it, and you was there and talked a little bit what's happening and changing right now, both of the jurisdiction and the sentiments of how to see silvers, and especially in South America. So, in a recent interview, you mentioned that gold and silver investment thesis has gotten stronger. Could you elaborate on that? What have changed over the last months or years that makes the setup even more compelling today?
Yeah. So, I mean, broadly, gold and silver, I think, the case has gotten better just in the last few months because of what's been going on in the Middle East. I think it's going to be very inflationary. We've seen that already. So, I'm not a genius to come up with this, but we've seen it in the oil price. That's been pretty dramatic, and it doesn't take much to realize that oil is. Oh, by the way, in terms of how silver is used, going back a couple of questions, oil is the single most broadly used commodity. I'm sure people can realize that globally. Silver, although it's a much smaller market, much, much, much smaller, it is the second most has the second most varied uses after oil. It is the commodity that has the most uses after oil. It has something like 10,000 different applications. So back to your question, oil price up. Oil is also ubiquitous. Oil is used for transportation. It's used to make all kinds of products, plastics. It's in used all kinds of processing. So you can imagine how it trickles down into our products, into the delivery of what we consume every day. Food is transported, by trucks, by train, by boat, to us from other places to get to our grocery stores. So the price of oil is way up, and the price jet fuel, for example, the price of oil and derivatives of oil are pushing up the cost of everyday living. And I think that, so a couple of interesting examples about that. I mean, already a few weeks ago, I was saying, watch for higher inflation later this year and watch for governments starting to do things like they did during COVID, during the financial crisis, where they're going to come out and announce projects and plans for to support businesses that are affected by higher oil prices. Well, we've seen it in France, we've seen it in Australia, we've seen it in multiple places in Asia. I'm in Canada. We've seen it here. We have the federal government has decided to give or lower taxes on gasoline for something like the next 6 months. In France, they're they're saying that companies that are critical to the economy can borrow up to 50,000 euros temporarily. In Japan, they said that they're going to stimulate as well, subsidize gasoline prices. I mean, this goes on and on and on. Well, just like during COVID, we've seen what has happened to prices overall in our daily lives since COVID. I just think we're going to see more of it. Watch the second half of this year. This is going to start happening, and as sort of concerning as it may be, that doesn't mean it won't happen. So I believe that's coming, and that's why I think just as physical metals, gold and silver, will benefit tremendously from that. That's what I see as having changed and making the case even more bullish for these metals as we go forward.
Yeah, I insist with you, and I also see that like the macro and the geopolitical is playing perfectly in for the mining sector, not just for the precious metals. It's all broad. The commodities is probably profiting really well on this one as it's happening right now.
Absolutely. And something that I forgot to mention too was also saying that watch for, much again like COVID, watch for large players, watch for countries, governments to start saying, much like they did when Russia walked into Ukraine, where they said, "Wow, well, because Russian assets were frozen by the U.S., and that's when central banks started buying a lot of physical gold." Well, in a similar way, and similar to the supply chain disruptions that we had during COVID, I would see, for example, and I'm sure it's happening already, but that you've got large players, governments, et cetera, saying, "Wow, well, it's one thing if I have to pay more for oil, at least if I can get it." Now they're not even sure they can get it because of the blockage of the Strait of Hormuz. So you can bet that they're starting to look at the very least sort of regionally, who can I buy oil from that is perhaps more dependable, not so far part of sort of a more regional supply chain for me, more sort of closely integrated. And even if I have to sign a deal where I'm going to buy X amount of oil from them for the next 5 years, 10 years, and pay above spot prices, but have more assurance of receiving this oil when I need it. Deals like that, I'm sure are being discussed, perhaps have already been signed. I'll give you another example. China has, in the last couple of months, has seen their sales of solar panels absolutely skyrocket. This is very bullish for silver. Silver is 20% of all of demand for silver every year from solar alone. The largest electrical utility in the UK, called Octopus Energy, said that in February and March, demand for solar panels had just soared by 50%. People are looking at this, and they consume, let's say, oil for home heating, and they say, wow, the price has gone up. What can I do? I can buy solar panels and substitute or at least diminish to some degree, my cost for energy. So these kinds of things are happening. They are inflationary. And so, again, bullish for the metals broadly, the inflation, bullish for silver specifically for its industrial uses. So I think that, these are certainly things for us to watch.
Yeah, thank you, Peter. And I know you're a busy man, but I have one last question I want
Of
to
course, of
ask
course.
you. And if silver were to stay here at like say $85, many silver miners could potentially see margins above $50 per ounce, which would be new for the sector. How transformative would that be for the financial health of silver miners? And do you think investors are still underestimating how much operating leverage these companies could have?
Yes, yes, I think it's huge. I think that the market broadly does not grasp this yet, and that's why in the last couple of months in my presentations I've been saying that, in fact, already in January when silver was topping, I said, "Oh, look, this is too much, too fast. Look for a correction." But I was saying the next opportunity in silver is going to be the miners, and that's because we're not going back to $30, $40 in silver. We're going to at least be in the 60, 70, $80 range, I think very likely going forward and gradually higher. But this is transformative for the miners, even for the explorers. Suddenly, a couple of things happen. You have perhaps tailings uh, of from silver projects, valuable ore that's just sitting there that now is well, I should say now is valuable, right? Projects that have large resources, for example, that had much higher cutoff grades can now lower the grades because the value of that silver, even if it's lower grade, is that much higher and makes it economic. And then you've got the producers who's we've seen it. I mean, we've seen it with multiple companies already in the from Q1 who've reported that we've seen, in some cases, of course, the profits are up significantly, the profits per ounce, but their overall profits over, quarter over quarter, for example, year over year, are a multiple. Sometimes they're 200-300% higher than they have been a year ago. So it's absolutely transformative. I don't think that the market has grasped that yet. And I think that's what we're going to start to see kick in over the next several quarters, especially say Q3, Q4, when further numbers are being reported and the market starts to see, oh, this is just not just a one-time thing. These companies are now making a lot more money because they're selling their silver at a much higher price. And even if their all-in costs go up from, say, who knows, 20 to 25 or even $30, these are still fantastic margins. They have not. I'll tell you a small anecdote. I had one mining executive about 2.5 years ago saying to me, "Peter, if we could just get silver over $30, then we would all be happy." And at the time, I don't know, it was probably around $22. And here we are at 70, $80. So, I mean, it's a sea change for these companies. And I do think that we're going to see a big revaluation in the sector. And I think that that's as these prices stay high and more of the sort of non-traditional precious metals investors start to realize this, see it, and come into this space, I think it's just going to look. Silver is a tiny sector. I'll give you a couple other examples. The four largest gold producers trade at 1.3 times price to net asset value. The four largest silver producers trade at 2.1 times net asset price to net asset value. So there's a scarcity premium for silver producers. There are so few compared to gold. I mean, the silver mining sector is perhaps 10%, 5% of the gold mining sector. Even though it's a relatively bigger percentage-wise a market, the miners are so few and far between. And so one last example, and this is not me saying it, but certainly I've seen the numbers elsewhere. There's a fund manager, Ned Naylor Leland of the Jupiter Asset Management, a gold and silver fund, $3 billion fund. And he was pointing out a couple of months ago that as I was just saying, the silver producers are at 2 times price to net asset value, but the silver developers are at 0.2 times price to net asset value. So to go from a developer to a producer is a 10 times return, just broadly for this silver sector. So, I mean, you can probably read the excitement in me and in my voice. I really think this is a place to be for the next few years. It's going to be pretty tremendous in terms of the returns that we're going to see.
I love it, and I share it with you because I have also followed this sector for so many years right now, and been struggling, and no one looks at it. But right now, it's so excited to be there and see what's happening. It's so much happening, and I think it's going to get pretty quick also coming last years. Yeah, thank you very much for that.
Of course, of course.
Just one last question before we leave you. It's the when what insights would you give to someone who invests with a 2 to 5 year time frame, but finds it very difficult to hold through a volatile period?
So even if you find it difficult, I would say be patient. When I wrote the book in 2022 or published it in 22, I was talking about $300 silver. We're going to see triple digit, and we're going to see much, much higher silver prices. And people were saying, hey, look, we can hardly make $20. How is this possible? And I believed it. So I took the time, I researched the market. I saw how tight silver production. Look, we peaked at 900 million ounces silver production 10 years ago. We have not revisited that level ever since, and yet demand has exploded. So we are simply not producing enough silver for the demand that we have. The only way this can adjust is with price, and I believed that. I knew it and I believed it. So I said, okay, well, that's my signal. This market is too tight. Silver has to go higher. And so back to your question, be patient. If it's much easier to be patient if you've done some research, you understand the dynamics, and then you believe in it, because then you can place your bets and then sit tight. And I end some of my presentations with a slide that says, patience is the rarest commodity. Well, I believe that. And as we talked about before we started the interview, that's more true than ever, with everything being so readily available to us, and instant gratification. So people have to get used to delayed gratification, because the gratification's bigger. If they want the bigger gratification, that's the way that you get it. So, if you have a 2 to 5 year horizon, but you're having a hard time with the volatility, what I would say is uh, adjust for that. Look, the silver market is very volatile. I'm the first one to admit that, but that's a benefit. That's something that you can turn into your favor. That means you have more opportunities. Yes, it makes it a little more hectic, but it gives you more opportunities to buy and maybe take profits. And then when there's a correction, you buy again more and then again take profits. I'm not saying to be a trader, but I'm saying that the volatility allows for at least multiple entry points in a sense. And I think with that, we're in a phase like that right now, frankly, since we've had this correction, because many stocks from January and February are off 40, 50%. So if you missed that first run, this is a fantastic time. Do some research, subscribe to a newsletter, read a book, and get informed, because this is a fantastic opportunity once again. But you can adjust for the volatility two ways. Be patient, wait for significant corrections. You can buy in gradually into your positions, and you can also say, look, I want some exposure. I like the interest the interesting potential of the upside of some of these exploration companies, because yes, they can provide fantastic returns. But that volatility scares me because they can also go to zero. That also happens, of course. So what you should do is that the positions that are the riskiest, maybe just keep your allocation to those a little bit smaller, and that helps you to adjust for it. And if you look at their, let's say, their importance in your overall silver allocation, then yes, they will be perhaps a little bit less meaningful. But if that's a concern for you, then you'll sleep better at night, because a big move will not have a bigger as big of an impact overall in your portfolio.
Yeah, thank you very much, Peter, for that. And those insights will be valuable, very valuable for hundreds of Swedes in our community as well. So thank you very, very much for that. And we really appreciate your time, and hopefully we meet soon again at some conference or other.
I think we will. I'm sure we will. Actually, I
Yeah.
look forward to it as well.
Thank you very much, Peter, and take care.
Ali, Fredrik, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure.
Då har vi avslutat sittningen med Peter Krauth. Väldigt bra samtal. Vi har träffat honom ett par gånger och vi har byggt en väldigt bra relation ihop. Och han är ju väldigt spännande, mer investerarfokuserad än vad jag tänkte mig. Haft en känsla av att han var lite mer skribent av något slag, men det visar sig att han är verkligen investeringsfokuserad, vilket var väldigt kul då. Vem är Peter, skulle du säga, Clay?
Ja, men och du är på det, för han är ju en spännande mix liksom. Det är precis som du säger, jag tror hans outro och det många man först fångar, det är mer liksom övergripande och makron, att han är väldigt bullens sektor och pratar mycket historik och sånt där. Men när man sätter sig och petar med han, så är han ju väldigt dig deep eller deep down i en portfölj av väldigt mycket innehav också. Och det är verkligen liksom spritt från minsta explorers upp till de absolut största minersarna. Och man slås också någonstans av hur centrerad han är runt silvret och inte liksom ädelmetaller i stort. Han har säkerligen en del guld så, men fokuseringen ligger verkligen runt silvret som sektor då.
Ja, verkligen. Silverfokuserad, han sa det att om vi tittar på tredje punkten, så varför silver? Så sa han tydligt det att det har alltid lockat mig med den sektorn, just för att vi har haft en sån extrem pessimism. Inte bara sen några år tillbaks, utan sen 40 år tillbaks, sen toppen 1980, så har det alltid varit liksom att silver har inte gjort någon rik. Så det har alltid varit sån underliggande extrem pessimism, vilket han såg tydligt under 2021-2022 också, när han väl lanserade sin bok. Och så säger han det med att tesen silver har bara stärkts också. Så det har blivit en mix av den extrema pessimismen, men också den tvåsidiga efterfrågan som metallen har, med både industriell och monetär karaktär då.
Ja, men och han är spännande att lyssna på liksom, och det är ju, man fångas ju väldigt mycket av hans entusiasm som han sitter på. Han skiner upp i frågor, vilket är ju fantastiskt att se. Och det roliga är att han går ju också väldigt mycket tillbaks i sin setup eller tes liksom. Vi har ju varit också inne på det, hur utbombad och hatad ett tillgångslag har varit under en sån extremt lång period. Och när liksom ett sånt släpper, då brukar det bli en förlösning av dess like. Och det är väl lite en tidsperiod vi är inne nu i att se silvret kanske ske då. Och han använder ju faktiskt även ett uttryck som både Rick Rule och andra gubbar, jag tror vi har nämnt det också, så här, either you're going to be a victim for the market or you're going to be a contrarian. Och just det där med att vara contrarian i silvret är ju någonting som han spelar rätt mycket på.
Verkligen. Men makron och hans tes om metallerna, det är ganska tydlig. Så han är helt och hållet övertygad om metallerna på sikt. Han säger att tesen har liksom stärkts. Han är en great silver bull. Han pratade om $300 silver under 2022, när sektorn var väldigt, väldigt hatad, så att säga. vilket är väldigt intressant då.
Ja, och vi har ju också varit inne på det under en lång period. Vi pratat $250 silver under ett länge och sagt att det är det minimum vi kommer ha till 2030. Och just nu så när vi toppade upp över $100 så var vi knappt halvvägs, och då börjar man inse att okej, det här är ju faktiskt på riktigt. För det är en sak när man sitter och pratar om det i teorin, och jag kan tänka mig att han kände lite samma sak. Att när du lyfter upp det, du ser setup och makro och så säger så här, men det här är rimligt att vi bör vara där borta. Men det är först när man börjar närma sig som det faktiskt kittlar till på riktigt då. Och det spännande i det här är ju någonstans när vi har sådana här unika setups som vi verkligen får i silvret just nu, och kommer få det i vissa råvaror. Och då är det ju som man verkligen säger, och det tråkiga i det är att oftast de som man önskar mest, det vill säga retail, de missar oftast de här setupsen väldigt rejält också. Och det är väl precis det vi har sett i våg 1. Det sköljer in sen, vi får rekyl, retail blir väldigt oroliga, många kliver av, och nu kommer nästa våg komma och det kommer sticka iväg, och retail kommer missa den setupen också. Så att det är ett speciellt läge, och det är en speciell relation att ha till silvret. Det är därför är det kanske en av de mest hatade metallerna där ute, och som alla säger, tesen, alltså det är aldrig någon som har tjänat pengar på silver. Nej, för att den är väldigt svårt att sitta still i, och det är väldigt svårt att tajma den, vilket gör att många går fel i den också.
Nej, helt och hållet. Han lämnar oss med, eller under samtalet och avslutningsvis så lämnar han oss med lite tips till våra investerare då. Och då pratar han om att the rarest commodity is patience. Så han vet om att det är just det här tålamodet som är så otroligt viktigt. Vi pratade om det en stund innan inspelningen, där vi pratade om just det här med tålamod och hur retail ständigt gör bort sig. Vi lever i en värld där allting ständigt ska gå väldigt fort. Vi ska alltid ha dopaminkickar, liksom TikTok korta videos, Instagram korta videos och liksom sådär. Och av den anledningen så blir ju patience ännu viktigare återigen, och du kan skapa dig en väldigt stark och bra edge i marknaden om du bara bygger den egenskapen att nej, men jag är tålmodig. För mig handlar det inte om att undvika volatilitet på 2 veckors, 4 veckors timeframe liksom, utan jag är här för det långa loppet, och att man liksom håller den ståndpunkten också. Och så säger han det att använd volatilitet till sin fördel. Sektorn är volatil, det har vi pratat om också. Vi har ju pratat mycket om att guldet är mer volatilt än silver, silver är mer volatilt än, eller vänta, guld är mer volatilt än SP500. Silver är mer volatilt än guld, och bolagen är liksom mer volatila än silversektorn. Vilket gör att det är väldigt mycket volatilitet. Använd den till sin fördel när det någonting stiger 20-30%. Det är inte då det är dags att agera så att säga.
Nej, men, och jag flikar in, jag tycker att de 2 tipsen är väl också kanske de 2 tipsen som vi skulle rekommendera till våran community också. Liksom vi pratar om det, tålamodet. Det är ju, pratar man att man investerar saker, det vill säga att man har lite längre sikt, då kommer tålamodet vara absolut största nyckeln. Och sen är det verkligen volatility is your best friend, för det är de som skapar öppningar och köplägen i marknaden. Så att lär man sig hantera, och man lär sig att liksom styra känslorna i tålamod och volatilitet, så kommer man klara sig väldigt bra på börsen framåt.
Precis. Och hur bygger man det här tålamodet? Hur bygger man den här commodityn som är så viktig? Då är det mycket att det grundar sig i förståelse för vad man investerar i och äger. Och det är därför vi pratar mycket om det också, att det är liksom, man ska förstå vad man äger, varför man äger, för då blir det betydligt lättare också att zooma ut, se helheten, förstå hur algos och market makers liksom dribblar bort retails medvetet. Det är ingen slump att de här rörelserna sker eller att volatiliteten sker på det här sättet, utan det är ju verkligen någon som försöker dribbla bort retails, och de kallar vi för algos då. Och han pratade ju lite om det också i inspelet, att det här är liksom förväntat, det är liksom en koordinerad attack på något sätt att dribbla bort retails. Det är liksom så marknaden fungerar.
Ja, men precis. Så att han är ju i stora drag rätt spot on på det, eller vi är rätt spot on på det som även han lyfter upp då.
Snyggt. Och det var egentligen allting för att summera podden med Peter Krauth. Och som ni ser, ni har hans Twitterkonto, ni har hans hemsida där länkad också, så att ni kan ju kika in och titta på vad han har att erbjuda också.
Härligt.
Ta hand om er, tjaba!
Hej hej.